another episode of Timber Talks, the art and science of arboriculture. I'm Mindy, and today we have a very special guest, Hans J. Tielmann, the founder and lead instructor at NJ Crane Expert. New Jersey Crane Expert specializes in providing crane certification and safety training, focusing on high-risk work environments. They offer a variety of classes for crane operators that include both theoretical and practical training. Today, we'll be discussing innovations in crane operation and safety, future prospects in the field, and practical advice for arborists and forestry professionals. Welcome, Hans.
Thanks, Minnie. I appreciate you having me on the podcast today.
Oh, no problem. So let's dive into our first segment, where we'll talk about innovations and advancements in the industry. Hans, could you tell us about the historical evolution of crane operations and safety training within the forestry and arboriculture industry?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So I meet people from all over the country, thousands of people a year, and I do get a lot of the same questions. So there's patterns in the way a lot of people in the industry think and the way they do things and why they want to use certain tools. And what I found is that a lot of people truly believe that some of these cranes were originally designed for dismantling trees, okay? And what they don't realize is that cranes have been around for decades, half a century now. And, they were mobile cranes. Cranes have been around since the Greeks and the Egyptians, and in some capacity, but modern cranes have been around since probably about the early 50s. And, they were developed for hauling and loading materials to construction sites and putting things in places that you can't reach with a ladder or, any other types of traditional types of rigging. And so when I tell people that, they're pretty perplexed. They're like, oh, it's interesting. I never thought of it that way. And I'm like, yeah, so when you're investing or utilizing a crane for tree work, you have to remember that their engineering process and the way that these pieces of machines are designed, they weren't originally intended for tree work. There are machines out there now where they consider tree work safety factors into how they develop and produce these machines, but traditionally they don't. So when I tell people that, they're kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm like, yeah, so when you're using this machine, you have to understand that these machines are historically designed to lift static loads that don't move very fast. And when we're lifting trees, sometimes or most of the time, what we're lifting is misshaped, uneven. It has different densities as far as wood material go and how we secure them. They have a varying weight in terms of how much that piece weighs, depending on the integrity and health of the tree. So there's a lot more to consider beyond what the manufacturer designed these machines to be used for. And that's where we come into play. Is we want to make sure we're enlightening our customers to ask those questions when they're using these machines in the field.
Okay. How has NJ Crane Expert adapted to these changes? So have you seen drastic changes, let's say, in the past 10 years as far as crane use in arboriculture?
Sure. Yeah. As far as industry trends go in the last 10 years or maybe even like 15 years, there has been a major uptick in acquisitions of cranes companies that have cranes for production tree work. And that's just something that was going to happen. It was inevitable. And the reason I say that is because historically, if you go back to, I want to say like the early 2000s, okay? If you wanted to set yourself apart as a production tree service in your area, the machine to have was a bucket truck, okay? If you wanted to get jobs done faster, or if you wanted to be able to be, have better margins in getting things done, you had to have a bucket truck to stand yourself out from everybody else. Okay. As we progressed, and especially where I'm from in the Northeast, we've had a couple of storms. Guys will get a little bit of money, and what do? They buy another piece of equipment. Okay. So by 2012 or 2014, everybody made money. They all had bucket trucks. So now you drive around. Every company has either a standalone bucket truck, 55 or 75-foot elevator, or they have forestry packaged bucket trucks with elevators. Okay. So now people are saying, all right, what's the next thing that's going to set me apart from my competitors? It's going to be a crane. Okay. Now, I come from a 50-year-old tree service. I'm a second-generation arborist. My dad adopted cranes back in the 70s. So we've been using cranes since the 70s to dismantle or manipulate wood material. So we were way ahead of the curve as far as that. We didn't have big cranes, but we had cranes that got stuff done. And we were also a very early adapter into having bucket trucks. So we saw that we were getting a lot more work than everybody else, and we were able to charge more accordingly because we had the right tools for the right jobs. Okay. So in 2014, that was something that we start to see an uptick in as a tree service professional, that we start seeing competitors or other people around the country via social media that they're like, oh, I'm getting a crane, whether it's a stick crane or a knuckle boom, to enhance that customer experience in terms of getting more work done more effectively.
All right. What are some of the latest technological advancements in crane operation training that NJ Crane Expert has incorporated into their programs?
Sure. So I've been teaching since 2018. I stopped doing production work in 2020. So there was a time where I was doing a little bit of both. Initially, when I started teaching, I was teaching formal crane certification programs. So it was theory-based education where we would go over operators' manuals, features and functions in a theoretical environment. And then we would test them out on a national level and get them accredited as a certified crane operator in the United States. As my customer base grew, I would ask, what else do you guys need? Now you have this certification. What else can I offer you, or what else can I bring to the table to make you more successful, to make you stand apart from your competitors? And they wanted, besides the fact that we have grown into a more of a bilingual training organization, we do a lot of stuff in Spanish. The next thing was like, we want hands-on, like almost coaching, like right in your ear, whispering tips and tricks of what to do. So we put together a very extensive operator development program where we would go out, me or one of my other trainers, we would go out and we would handhold new operators, or even sometimes seasoned operators, to make sure that they're operating at the highest efficiency with keeping safety at the forefront of everything that they're doing in the field. And we found that learning curve has drastically dropped because of the fact that we're putting the right information on how to think and the right questions that they're asking in those in-field moments that they're working. So we found that, I haven't done any sort of like formal, I guess, research program or anything, but we found that an educated, skilled operator is going to outperform a novice any day. Somebody that might go low and slow, who gradually gains that experience, they're still asking those same questions that we're giving our customers right there on the first day. So we found that has been a tremendous insight into our customers as far as getting work done, but also as far as the longevity of the equipment, maintenance, breakdowns, helping people troubleshoot and make sure that, that they understand, don't do this or this is the consequence. Take the time to set up the right way or this is the consequence. As far as cranes are related, they have big rewards, but with those big rewards have big risks if you do not use them the right way. And it's not something that happens right away, but sometimes there's an incident and it takes 6 months for that incident to cause something to break down structurally, and then that crane fails. So we want to make sure that they have all that information presented to them, so they can make good choices.
There's nothing that replaces hands-on learning.
No. And that's the other thing, is that a lot of customers, they don't want to be learning on the job. They don't want to lose the time that they're taking away from business to teach people stuff, and it's a blessing and a curse, because obviously we want everybody to be safe. We want everybody to be running at the highest efficiency levels, but at the same time, we don't want to go to a customer, a homeowner, and say, hey, today we're cutting your tree down your house and we're learning how to do that on your dollar, on your property, at your expense, So that's all part of how we educate our customers to set up the training, or we set up the training and say, hey, this is ideally the environment that we would want. We can do it here, here, or here. This is what we need in terms of tools available, so that when we show up, our trainers are ready to go. There is no downtime in terms of getting the most out of our time being there.
Right. Can you share a success story where New Jersey crane experts training significantly improved safety and efficiency in a high-risk environment?
Sure. I can't think of any specific case studies, but we've had customers where we went out there, we did their initial training. A lot of times, the YouTube is also a blessing and a curse, where guys will be like, hey, I own a construction business. I saw this crane on YouTube. I want one. Okay. And they buy a crane. We do our briefing where we call and ask questions about their experience and, what they know about the work that we're going to be doing. And a good portion of them end up saying, oh, I drove trucks, or I ran an excavator for 20 years. And now I want to get into a more of a niche service offering as it relates to dispatching cranes for tree work, or even cranes in general, lifting. Okay. And we go out there and we're like, we have to stay a couple more days. These guys aren't ready yet. And we stay, and we do the training. And what's really big for my team is that we constantly communicate with our customers. So we're always checking in and making sure everything's okay. But the true success stories is that there's customers out there that they started buying a used second-hand piece of equipment, and now they have 3 brand new cranes, that they've grown to the point where that they can, they're reinvesting and getting more equipment, or they're upgrading to different types of machineries, or even sometimes, maybe they bought the wrong crane that was too big, and they realize, oh, my area, I don't need a machine that big. They downgrade to a smaller, more compact type of machine. And that's all the stuff that realistically, my job as an educator is to teach you how to ask the right questions, So I want to make sure that, we're paying my students and my customers, they're paying attention, saying, hey, this works, this doesn't work. Let's adapt. Cranes force you to adapt because you were in this type of tree business. And now if you're going to be effective with that machine, you have to change your business model to work around the fact that you are utilizing a more high ticket priced item. That's the type of work that you're going to be generally focusing on.
Okay. Now let's shift our focus to your future prospects and upcoming innovations in the field. What emerging technologies or trends do you see shaping the future of crane operations and safety training in the forestry and arboriculture industry?
Sure. So, this is my brain kind of coming out right now in terms of there's not really anything like this going on yet, but I do see that there's going to be a shift towards more of the augmented AI applications into tree work. We're starting to see advanced imagery processes going into place where we're able to identify fatigue and different types of defects in trees with cameras and analysis processes. And truthfully, I think that definitely in the future, you're going to be able to run one of these machines from home or from your office, if not completely augmented via NFC tagging and branch. You'll able to do load planning and stuff all virtually in terms of like where to make picks and analyze tree growth structures. It's years away from that happening, but as far as equipment goes, they already have route planning for cranes. So if you know that crane needs to go back to that spot, as long as there's no obstructions in place, you can hit a button and the crane can operate itself to reorient itself back to the origin spot. And then vice versa, you can have a route planned for your landing zone. My current crane, I have an auto fold, auto deploy feature where I can hit a button and my crane knows how to open itself up. So there are technologies out there. I'm hesitant to say that they're going to need work, because historically, as an arborist or as somebody that's worked with people who come from an older generation, we like less is more, so less sensors, less things that could cause problems or diagnosis problems. So again, bittersweet opportunity. But like I said, I think that that's all just that, and those technologies have to advance, the proc sensors and moisture issues and things that we're experiencing now only is going to improve itself, the horse before the cart, so as we grow, everything has to kind of progress in terms of that technology. If we're experiencing the same issues over and over again, nobody's going to want to invest in equipment like that. So.
Right. Well, it's very similar in ag,
Yeah, like nice energy
and
yeah,
stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it's very similar. So when remote sensing first came out, it definitely put a divide between the older generation and the new generation, and now they've kind of meshed a little bit.
So how many years did that take?
Oh gosh, when I was in college, remote sensing and GIS was just starting, and then when I got my master's, it had really bloomed. It was at least 10 years before it really became
a thing. Yeah.
A thing, and then drones came in, and again, you still had that divide. But I did a business competition over a drone for the use in ag, and unfortunately, I did the competition in a rural community, and needless to say, I didn't win, which I was fine with that. But it was trying to get the farmers to understand if you want to stay in business, this is a direction you're going to have to go. You may not like it, but if you're going to be competitive. So, and in the fact that I was a woman telling them they needed to do this, I didn't help that either. So, but it took at least 10 years. But, like when I was getting my master's, we were doing research using GIS for, I'm right across the river from Louisville, and we were doing research examining the sewer systems over in Louisville using GIS and some other projects like that. So, but it took a good 10 years before I was all excited about remote sensing. I was like, wow, type thing. But
we as an industry, we like what we like and we only trust what we know, and also just like with anything, no one wants to be the guinea pig.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I do think that there's going to be we're going to break a couple eggs before we make an omelet. And as far as tree care goes, I would say if you say 10 years, I'm going to say 15. So and that's just the certainty that we have to have and the technology that we have. But that's why we work. My team and I we do work with a lot of the larger manufacturers and making sure that they have a good pulse on the industry in terms of what our voices want, So I do travel a lot. I go to a lot of shows and I speak to people, and I want to make sure that I am a good representation of what our industry wants in terms of the growth that we want and having the right growing pains.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I'm seeing that it's different, but it's the same. I'm seeing a similar trend with AI. I'm already seeing the divide. I want you to do this solely with AI, or I don't want you to do it with AI. And so it's going to take a while for that technology in itself to kind of to shake out and see what
sticks.
What sticks, what society is going to accept, what companies are going to accept, like Amazon, book publishers, etc. Because I'm an international author, and there's there's this clear cut divide, and yeah, you can speed your work up this way, but you'd pay a price. It just really, it's going to take about 10 years, I think, for this whole AI thing. Colleges have jumped on the bandwagon with kids using it to write papers but it is what it is. I have my own personal opinion of AI, but it doesn't really matter because it's here to stay. We just need to tease out some things about it. What steps can current professionals take to prepare for these upcoming changes and ensure they stay ahead in their field so that
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is that most of these guys, we as an industry, we have a tremendous amount of pride. Tremendous. Okay. We're very prideful in the work that we do. We have a lot of pride in our equipment. We have a lot of pride in our team. And what I have to tell people a lot of times is that if you want to stay afloat and you want to get ahead, you have to be a good planner. Okay. Plan accordingly, plan for training, all right? So you should be doing something on at least a monthly basis for a day, okay? Some sort of training formally, not like, oh, let's look at these ropes today. Like, sit down, put together a plan. And if that's something that they need help with, they can reach out to me. Be happy to guide them through that process. But plan for training, okay? Second thing is plan to go to networking events, okay? There's a lot of shows out there. There's more and more shows popping up where as far as regionally, in almost every region of the country, there's something on a state level or a regional level at least one time a year, sometimes more, okay? And then we have the national shows, national conferences and expos to go to where you're going to meet some of these trailblazers, and you want to ask them lots of questions. Okay. How'd you do well with this? What did you not like with that in terms of, anything? So like I said, if it's cranes, you're going to want to find who that crane person is regionally to pick their brain. I grew up in New Jersey. I worked for my dad for a long time. And my dad taught me a lot, but it wasn't until I started to travel that I truly was able to get a really good pulse on the struggles and the opportunities that the tree care industry has to offer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, any business or career paths or whatever can really benefit from networking. Just picking other people's brains about situations. So I think that's great advice for really anybody in any industry. So would you recommend possibly a person working with like a land grant college or something along that lines, because Elaine Grant College would have a forestry program, and maybe that would be also another venue of having your finger on the pulse of the industry to see what types of technologies they're working on, or research. Would that be another venue that you would suggest?
Sure. We you could definitely reach out to any sort of university that offers that. There's definitely opportunities there. We do work with our local Polytechnical Institute for the high school kids who are looking to get into trades, where historically, if you want to pull levers or if you want to run machines, they typically steer you down the construction route of the dirt world, where we have a big crusade right now or mission that to educate the younger generation that there's opportunities to do that in the tree care field. So a lot of times when you hear of tree care businesses advertising, or even big associations, it's all about the climber. It's all about plant health care. It's all about, if you're a ground guy, you have a bushel full of brush under your arm all day. That there's opportunities for mini skid operators, mini loader operators, running debris trucks, running cranes, and a lot of those kids that run bulldozers and run excavators, that's an easy transition in terms of you're a debris manager. Your job is to manage and move debris. And that's typically one of the biggest struggles when guys or gals get cranes, is that they get all this material on the ground. Now they got to get it out of here, So it's a very big opportunity for younger kids to get a job with a good salary, and grow with a company as an operator.
Okay. So I know where I'm in Indiana, we have a vocational school. The kids go half a day to their high school and then they go to the vocational school, and they do have a construction program there. Have you ever thought about teaching at that type of level for the next generation, being part of the construction?
Yes. Yeah, that's something that I've been considering for a couple of years now. I haven't really had the opportunity to do that, but we have been supplementing the current program. We do own 2 mobile crane simulators that we can pull up, and it's all air conditioned and powered in a trailer, and you can sit in a crane and run it without any risk. So that's something that we want to entice the younger kids to say, hey, you might be nervous. This crane's really big. Let's put you in the simulator for a few weeks, a couple hours a day, and let's get you feeling, getting the feel for the controls. All of our simulators, they're motion access bases. So as you swing the crane, it'll rock or move, and all the same kind of little signs and concepts that you would see in the real world that we can recreate in a safe environment.
Okay. All right. So for our final segment, let's talk about some practical advice and best practices for our listeners. What are some common safety issues that arborists face when operating cranes and other heavy machinery, and how can they avoid them?
Sure. So as we were talking about the past, right, the last 10 years, and how we've grown so much into the crane world or crane use in the arboricultural industry, so has accident rates. All right. So, people are like, oh, cranes are dangerous. I get it all the time. They're like, why would I use that? There's so much risk. And I'm like, yes, there's risk. But the reason why we have so many more accidents these days is because there's so much more product in the market. Okay. Like there's still bucket truck accidents happening every day, but nobody's saying, oh, bucket trucks are dangerous. Right. But back, in 2002, when we had the bucket trucks, there was much less accidents because there wasn't so much product and inventory out there in the used and the new market. Now everybody's like, when we first started, there was maybe a couple hundred of these machines out there, and now there's thousands of them. So of course there's going to be more problems. But what's really cool about my job and meeting the people that I'm meeting, the users, and hearing from their experiences, and when things do go bad, what was the outcome or what was the official ruling of why that happened? what we are experiencing is lack of knowledge in terms of understanding and calculating wood weight upon lifting a tree, because once we cut it, we can't put it back, So understanding how much is too much, understanding that what the load chart says is the final rule, like that's it. There's no more that this crane is capable of, okay? Understanding that when we're making a lift, that the crane, the boom will deflect. And when that deflection happens, the radius of the load on the hook will increase, which lowers our capacity. And that when we set up our cranes, when they design these cranes, they're designed for construction. So they're meant to be set up on concrete pavement or, in a job site that's not residential, where there's so many more obstacles that we have to handle, and that you have to prepare to recreate those ideal conditions every day. When they made those load charts, it was set up on a clear, no wind day, no rain. The ground was flat on concrete, and now we're bringing it into somebody's backyard where it's clay. It may have rained the day before, uneven ground. We have septic systems. We have foundations and basements to consider. We're in a tight access spot, and you have to make those good decisions and saying that a good enough is never enough. We have to be right. Everything has to be right. So I try to embody that principle to my students, is that you don't do it that way, you do it the right way.
Right.
And my other piece of advice that I try to tell everybody is always be a student. Always keep an open mind. You might not agree with somebody, but hear them out. Don't try and be a know-it-all, because there's going to be somebody out there that might know a little bit more about a certain subject than you, and you should take that information and use your best judgment or source that information to see if it's accurate.
Is it? Can you share some best practices for efficiently and safely using bucket trucks, chainsaws, and chippers in tree care operations?
Do you have a couple of hours?
What would be your top 10? How about
top 10? Again, it comes down to, well, let's start with the ground. Anytime we're using any type of equipment, we want to make sure we have a good base. So if we're using a bucket truck, is the machine capable of, are we supposed to keep the tires on the ground, or are we supposed to lift it completely up? If we're lifting it completely up, we want to make sure that nothing slides if we're on a hill. If we're dealing with a chainsaw, and we're making some cuts on the ground, we want to make sure we have good footing on the ground. We don't want any slip, trips, or falls, right? If we're using a chipper, same thing. If we're dealing with ground conditions, if we're on a hill, you don't want to be working anywhere near the deck of the crane, the deck of the chipper, where you could potentially trip and fall into the deck because the chipper is in a position where you're standing higher than where the chipper is sitting, okay? As far as the equipment itself, making sure that you are very familiar with any tool that you're using, what its maintenance procedures are. We want to make sure that our machines are always working at their ready for use condition. So making sure we're cleaning filters and making sure we're greasing things, making sure that everything's been tested before we put it into service. And as far as testing that goes, that means, running all the functions on the job or in your yard before you bring it out to the job to make sure the repairs have to be made. I would prefer to make a repair in my yard to be making a repair on the job. So making sure we do our pre-operation inspection on the chipper, the crane, or the bucket truck is crucial to making sure that it operates, accordingly. Mm-hmm. As far as working our way up, working a loft, making sure that we have control over our tools, ourselves, and the material that we're cutting down, keeping an eye out for our team on the ground, making sure that if we're dropping something, that the area below is clear, that we can account for all of our team members before we lay a tree over, and making sure that we're constantly vigilant for Um, we're constantly vigilant for the homeowner or any sort of bystanders that are potentially could be walking through a job site and having control over where that job site starts and stops. Those are my top 10 right there.
All right. So in a sense, make sure your equipment's maintained, make sure you know where everybody's at, and don't take undue risks, essentially.
And make sure you have good ground conditions.
All right. How important is it for tree care professionals to stay updated with certifications like those offered by New Jersey Crane Expert? And what benefits do they gain from these certifications?
Sure. So before I get into that, I just want to explain what training is. Okay. So there's different levels of education and training. Education is more theory-based. Training is more hands-on. Okay. When we're training, what our goal is to build skill. Okay. We're building skill. You can't do that in the classroom. So some of our classes that we offer, I say that right away. I'm like, this is not a skill building class. This is here for general knowledge and theory-based education for you to learn how to ask those questions. And then it's up to you to practice and build those skills. Then we have our skills building classes, which are straight right to the grit. Let's start working and evaluate and adjust and then try again. So as far as training goes, okay, the most basic level of training is competent training. Okay, so are they competent at the tasks that they're going to be doing? Okay, so that is showing your employee how to do something, then confirming that they understand how and why, and then them doing it. Okay. The next level of training is going to be a qualification. Are you qualified to do your job? Okay. A qualification is something that's held. It's a certificate program that's held by the employer. Okay. So it's the same thing. It's being shown how to do your job. Okay. Understanding how you do your job by taking a written examination. Okay. Or, some sort of quiz that says that you were able to take the information provided, retain it, test out on it. Okay. And then perform a practical examination where they have to go through a series of tasks in order to test out as a qualified user or specialist under their training, under their company as an employee. Okay. And then above qualification, then there's certification. Okay. Certification is the same process as a qualification, but instead of it being backed by the employer, it's backed by an accredited association, accreditation, and that is whether it's regional or national, and that credential is held with the individual. So if that individual were to leave a job, that credential transfers with him. Okay. So same as qualification, but it's a personal credential that moves with that person. And it typically expires or has to be renewed anywhere between 2 and 5 years. Most of them are 5 years, but there are some that are down to 2 that has to be renewed. Okay. Or some are, or like if you had to do aerial rescue or EHAP, that has to be done every year. Same thing with first aid CPR. First aid CPR is every 2 years, depending on the one that you take. Crane certification is going to be every 5. Above certification, which is the highest level, which is a license. Okay, just like if you were to get a license to drive a car, you are licensed to drive in any state. Okay, that is a state-wide program. Same thing. You have to test written examination, test practical examination, and then you would be issued your state license. Some of those licenses for cranes are not transferable out of the state that they're in. Some of them you can adopt or get adopted into other states, but you would hold a state license. You would hold a state license crane operator's license. So that's the hierarchy. It goes license, certification, qualification, competent in terms of training goes.
Yeah. Okay. Is there an advantage to having the certifications like at the state level, besides being able to know what to another employer?
Yeah. So if your state has a license, it's a requirement.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's not something that's optional. If they require a state operator's license, that's just like a car. If you need to have a driver's license to drive a car, you have to have a crane operator's license to operate a crane in your specific state.
Okay. How many states do have that requirement?
I want to say at least 10. At least 10 of them have a license. I'd have to look. It's a lot of them are in the Northeast area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I was just curious do you see it maybe becoming a trend that more states are going to pick that up? Or
it will. The more accidents that we're going to be experiencing, the more legislation's going to be pushed into doing that. But then there's some states that don't require anything for what you're lifting. Or certain very loose restrictions on what you're capable of lifting and not lifting. Yeah.
I saw a similar thing. I have 3 drones, and I saw a similar thing when drones first came out. Well, not first came out, but when they were more easily attainable about having to have a license with the FFA to be able to fly a drone. So that's a whole nother topic for another time. Yeah. But it was just kind of interesting. It was like they didn't think about that. It's a new technology. Everybody's going to want it. Everybody's going to buy it. And then, we have people flying it into buildings and stuff like that.
Well, that's similar to, maybe where that technology comes into places for crane operations is that, when those drones first came out, you were able to fly them, no restrictions, right? The only way that they could tell if you did it or not was if you crashed and they looked into the drone and saw where you were flying. Nowadays, you can't fly unless you get permission through the drone. They have that software features where they'll lock you out. You can't fly here, or they'll limit you with those, what those walls are, those walls of safety. Where maybe in the future that will be the same thing for cranes, where you can't run the crane unless you type in your certification number, every time or something where it shows that who's operating this machine, what those limitations are.
Right. It was just funny to me how it was like, it just wasn't thought through. And then, you had all sorts of things happening, and then the privacy issue. And then, in Louisville, there was a gentleman that shot a drain out of the air with a shotgun because he felt it flew over the property line. It's like, anyway, I guess that's the price we pay when we don't think about technology and just go out and buy a bunch of stuff and play with it. So, So, like I said, that's a topic for another day.
Sure.
So, that brings us to the end of today's episode of Timber Talks, the art and science of arboriculture. Hans, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and follow us for more insightful discussions on forestry and arboriculture. For more information on NJ or New Jersey Crane Expert and their training programs, visit their website at njcraneexpert.com. Until next time, this is Mindy signing off. Stay safe and keep growing.